My wife demanded, "I need access to your inheritance or I'm leaving." I said, "Leave then." She thought I was bluffing until she saw I'd moved the funds into an irrevocable trust that specifically excludes spouses. Our owner's reaction was priceless. It all started when my dad passed away last year. Watching him wither away from cancer was the hardest thing I've ever done. We were closer than most fathers and sons. He built a business from the ground up, manufacturing parts for aerospace companies. Sold it a few years before he got sick, invested the proceeds, and planned his estate carefully. When he died, everything between my sister and me after the taxes, I ended up with about $123,000. My wife and I had been married for 6 years. She's 33, works part-time as a bookkeeper and pulls in maybe $28,000 a year, making around $94,000. We've always kept our finances separate, her checking, my checking, and one joint account for the mortgage and bills. It worked fine. When the inheritance cleared, I set up in a separate investment account at a different bank. Just my name. I told her about it right away, showing her the statements, the exact amount, everything. I'm not the type to hide things. She was supportive at first, said how sorry she was for my loss and how smart my dad had been with money. She even called it a good safety net for us. She said we wouldn't touch it unless we really needed it. But that lasted maybe 3 weeks. It started subtly. One morning while we were having coffee, she said, "I'm thinking we should really update the kitchen. It's looking a bit dated. We'd renovated the kitchen 5 years ago. It was fine. Use some of the inheritance," she continued, "just like $30K. We'd get it all back when we sell the house anyway." Until when the kitchen was fine, but she kept going. "Well, my car is getting old. You've got a practically new car." Her car was a 2019 Honda Accord with 40,000 miles on it. "I think we should enjoy the money. Your dad would want us to enjoy it," she said, looking at me like I was being unreasonable. I let it slide. But it didn't stop. I've been thinking about going back to school, getting my CA. I could quit my job, focus on studying, the inheritance could support us. I could take a few months off work, travel, clear my head, we have the money. Why not use it? Every conversation, somehow, always circled back to that money. I tried to ignore it, thinking it would fade. Then one Tuesday night, we were having dinner. I made chicken parmesan. She set her fork down, looked at me, and the expression on her face, hard determined, stopped me mid-bite. "We need to talk about your inheritance." Something about her tone made my stomach drop. "Well," Kay said, unsure what was coming next. "I want to be added to the account," she said, staring me down. "What?" I barely managed to get the word out. "I want full access. We're married, Simon. What's yours is mine. Lemon is yours. That's how it works, right? You've been hiding this huge pot of money from me. You don't trust me with it." I blinked, trying to process her words. "It's my inheritance. It stays in my name. I'm not hiding it from you." She shook her head. "But I can't access it. Can't transfer money. I can't make decisions. We're supposed to be partners. How are we partners if I don't even have control over our finances?" "It's not our money," I said, my voice steady but tense. "It's what my dad left me." Her face froze, then turned cold. "So you don't trust me?" I didn't know how to answer that. I wasn't hiding anything. I just wanted the money to stay out of the relationship, to protect it. "This isn't about trust," I said slowly, "it's about what my father wanted." She stared at me for a long time, as if trying to force an answer out of me. Then, her lips curled into a tight smile. "Fine, here's how it's going to work. Either you add me to that account, or I'm leaving." Her words hit me like a slap. "I'm leaving," she said, as if it was just another casual threat. But there was nothing casual about it. I stared at her, trying to process what was happening. This wasn't just about money anymore. She wasn't asking me to make an investment, she was asking for control, for access to something that wasn't hers. "You're giving me an ultimatum?" I asked, my voice flat. "I'm telling you what I need to feel like an equal partner in this marriage," she said, eyes flashing. "I can't be married to someone who doesn't trust me enough to share everything. This is the one thing you're keeping from me." It didn't make sense. We had always been transparent with each other about everything: finances, work, our future. But this was different. The inheritance wasn't about the marriage. It was my dad's legacy. She had no claim to it. I wasn't going to give in. I took a breath and looked her in the eye. "If that's what it takes, then leave. I'm not giving you access to my father's money." Her face changed. It was like I'd slapped her. But I couldn't take back what I'd just said. This was a line I wasn't willing to cross. "I mean that," she said, her voice a mix of disbelief and anger. "I do," I said, feeling the weight of the decision settle in my chest. "If you're going to leave over this, then go. I'm not to be forced into a decision like this." She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor like the sound of nails on a chalkboard. "Fine," she said, her voice trembling now, more with fury than sadness. "I'll go stay at my mom's. You'll have some time to think about this, but don't think you've won. I go in to live in a marriage where I'm treated like I don't matter." She grabbed her purse and her phone, leaving the house without another word. I sat there at the kitchen table, staring at the cold chicken parmesan, trying to figure out what had just happened. The silence in the house felt deafening. For the first time in years, I was alone, but not in the way I had imagined. My wife was gone, and it wasn't because of something small. It was because I'd chosen to stand my ground. To protect something that didn't belong to both of us. I tried to replay the conversation in my head, to figure out where it went wrong. But there was no mistaking it. She wasn't angry because I was holding on to the inheritance. She was angry because I wasn't willing to share it with her. The thought of her leaving over something like this made my stomach twist. We'd been through so much together, hadn't we built something? But now it seemed that all of it had been conditional, based on what I was willing to give her. I picked up the phone and called my sister, needing someone to talk to. She answered quickly. "Hey," I said, my voice heavy. "My wife just walked out." "What? Why?" "She gave me an ultimatum about the inheritance, wants full access, or she's leaving." I could hear the silence on the other end. "I told her to leave." "You need a lawyer," Meister said after a long pause. "I know someone who specializes in this kind of stuff. Estate planning trusts. I'll send you her info." I wasn't sure if I was making the right decision, but I couldn't keep living in fear that my wife would manipulate me into giving up something that wasn't hers. I wasn't the one who had caused this. It was her demands, her insistence on treating my father's legacy like a joint asset, when it had nothing to do with our marriage. "Thanks," I said, the knot in my stomach still there. "I'll call her tomorrow." I hung up, but the weight of the situation hadn't lessened. I sat in the silence of the house, wondering if things would ever be the same again. But something told me, deep down, that they never would be. The next few days were a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. My wife was gone, and I was left with the heavy weight of that ultimatum hanging over me. At first, I tried to talk myself into believing she was just angry and would come around. But every time I thought about the way she'd looked at me cold, demanding, as if my refusal was a betrayal, it only solidified the fact that this wasn't just a fight. This was something deeper. I spent most of the next day avoiding the empty space where we'd shared so many meals, too many arguments, and far too many moments of compromise. I couldn't bring myself to stay in the house. Every corner felt like a reminder of everything I was losing, or maybe everything I had already lost. My sister's lawyer recommendation led me to someone who was sharp, no nonsense. Patricia, in her late 50s, had a reputation for handling difficult family estate matters like a pro. The moment we sat down in her office, I knew I had made the right choice. She wasn't here to comfort me. She was here to help me take control of the situation. I told her everything. She listened without interruption, only nodding occasionally, her face giving nothing away. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, her hand steepled in front of her, and finally spoke. "Let me be blunt with you," she said, her voice smooth but firm. "Your wife just told you exactly who she is. She values that money more than your marriage. That's what an ultimatum means. Believe her." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to argue, to believe that this wasn't true, but deep down, I already knew. My wife had shown me who she really was, and now it was clear the inheritance wasn't about our future, it was about what she felt entitled to, what she thought she deserved. Patricia's eyes met mine, and there was a flicker of something sympathy. Maybe, but it was quickly replaced by something sharper, more calculating. "Here's what we're going to do," she continued. "We're going to protect that inheritance. It's yours, and you don't owe her anything." She explained the legal steps, how we would set up an irrevocable trust to lock the money away. I'd be the primary beneficiary with my sister as a co-trustee. The key part, a trust would explicitly exclude spouses from any claims to the assets. Even if my wife filed for divorce tomorrow, or 10 years from now, that money would be completely protected. It would be untouchable. I asked her how fast we could get it done. Patricia smirked slightly, as though she'd expected me to ask. "Draft family end of the week," she said. "You'll review it and sign early next week. Once it's irrevocable, it's locked forever. Even you can't dissolve it. That's what makes it bulletproof." That's when it hit me, this was real. It was no going back. I was about to take a step I could never undo, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. But there was no other option. I couldn't let her think she could manipulate me into giving her access to something that wasn't hers. "Do it," I said. Patricia gave me a sharp nod. "Smart man, your dad raised you right." When I left her office, I felt a strange mix of relief and fear. The relief came from knowing I was finally taking action, putting something solid between me and the emotional mess my wife had created. But the fear lingered too. What would she do when she found out? Would she escalate? Would I lose everything I'd worked so hard for, my marriage, like peace of mind, just to protect what was rightfully mine? My wife texted me. "Have you calmed down? Ready to talk about this like adults?" The message was cold, almost condescending, but I could see through it. She was testing me, trying to see if I'd bend. I didn't respond. was there to say. She had made her demands clear, and now it was my turn to stand firm. I wasn't going to be bullied into surrendering my father's legacy. That money was the last thing he left me. I wasn't about to let her take it from me. Next morning, I called Patricia again to make sure everything was in motion. "We'll have it ready for you by the end of the week," she assured me. "You'll sign it, and then we'll transfer the funds. Once that's done, it's locked." As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of finality. It was like a chapter of my life was closing, and no matter what happened from here on out, I couldn't go back. The next few days were a blur of paperwork and phone calls, but the reality of what I was about to do began to sink in. I had made the decision to set up the irrevocable trust, but it didn't make the process any easier. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like I was pushing my wife out of my life completely, like I was locking away not just the inheritance, but everything we had built together. Still, I couldn't let the guilt overtake me. I had to do this, for my father, for myself. When the trust documents came through, I reviewed them carefully. It was all in order. My sister and I would be co-trustees, with me as the sole beneficiary. A clause that explicitly excluded spouses from any claims to the funds was detailed, clear and airtight. Once this was signed and executed, the money was legally untouchable. Not just by my wife, but by anyone. That night, I went to bed with a feeling of dread settling in my stomach. Well, it wasn't just the legal steps I was taking that felt heavy, it was the emotional cost. I had never imagined that protecting something as personal as my father's legacy would drive such a wedge between me and my wife. The next day, I received a call from Patricia. "Everything's in place," she said. "You're scheduled to sign the documents this afternoon. Once you do, the trust is locked in. There's no going back." "All right," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Let's get it done. After hanging up, I stared at my phone for a moment. Part of me felt like I was finally taking control of the situation. One other part of me, one I didn't want to acknowledge, felt like I was sealing my fate. My wife had already walked out. What if this was the final straw? What if the trust was the reason she'd never come back? But then I remembered her ultimatum: give me access or I'm leaving. She had chosen to walk away. I wasn't the one who had broken things. She had made her choice. I drove to the lawyer's office, my hands gripping the steering wheel a little tighter than usual. As I walked into Patricia's office, I was greeted by the same calm, professional atmosphere that had been there when I first met her. This wasn't just a business transaction anymore, it was the final act in a drama I hadn't expected to unfold. Patricia sat me down, sliding the documents across the table. "Take your time," she said, though I could tell she was ready for me to sign and move on. I scanned the trust documents one last time. Everything was as it should be. My heart was pounding. I could hear the faint ringing in my ears, but I didn't hesitate. I signed. "You're all set," Patricia said after a moment, placing her pen down. "The funds are locked, and your wife will have no claim to them." I nodded, my stomach still in knots. As I left her office, I felt like I had done what I had to do. I also felt like I was crossing some invisible line that I couldn't take back. No matter what happened now, the course was set. I was protected, but at what cost? Later that evening, my wife texted again. It was a short, blunt message: "Have you calmed down yet? Ready to talk like adults?" I stared at the screen for a long time, debating whether I should respond. The part of me that wanted to fix things, to find a way back to the life we had, urged me to reach out. The rational part of me, the part that had made the hard decision, knew there was no point in going back. I didn't respond. That night, as I sat alone in the house, I could feel the weight of the silence. It was almost suffocating. I had made the right choice, but it felt like I was walking into the unknown. I thought back to the days when we were happy, when the future felt like a promise rather than a battlefield. But that was before the ultimatum. Before she made it clear that her love, our marriage, could be bought. The divorce papers were coming. I knew it. I wasn't sure when, but the tension between us had reached a breaking point. I hadn't expected it to happen this way. I hadn't imagined it would get so ugly. But I had learned something important from this whole ordeal. My father had always taught me the value of hard work, of protecting what's yours. I was just doing what he would have done. I had to protect my inheritance, and in doing so, I had to protect myself. But at what cost? I didn't have the answer, not yet. As the night stretched on, I tried to push the fear out of my mind. I had taken the first step in securing my future. But now I had to face whatever consequences followed. The days that followed felt like a slow, deliberate unraveling. I kept thinking about the trust, how it was a shield for me, but also a barrier between me and the life I once knew. Wife hadn't come back, and I hadn't expected her to. I had known, deep down, that when she left, it wasn't just about the inheritance. It was about something deeper, something I hadn't fully realized until it was too late. The trust had been finalized. The assets were legally untouchable, and there was no going back. But I had a nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach that I hadn't anticipated the consequences of this decision. Was this really the right thing to do? Could I have found another way to protect my father's legacy without pushing my wife so far away? I pushed those questions aside, knowing I couldn't afford to doubt myself now. The next morning, I called Patricia to confirm that everything was set in stone. She assured me that the funds had been moved and that the trust was in place. "We're good," she said. "No one, including your wife, has any claim to that money now." Thanks, I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, getting through work as best as I could. But my mind kept drifting back to my wife, the woman I had married, the woman I had trusted, now gone. I realized just how much of my sense of stability had been tied to her, even with all the tension between us. But now, with everything so final, I was starting to feel the weight of that loss. A few hours later, my phone buzzed. I picked it up, seeing my wife's name on the screen. The message was short: "Have you calmed down? Ready to talk like adults?" I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to. I wanted to hear her voice to see if there was any way to salvage this mess. When I knew the conversation would never be the same. The ultimatum had changed everything. I thought back to the night she'd left. How she had walked out with such conviction. How she had believed I would cave. How she had believed the money would convince me to compromise. But I hadn't. And now she was coming back, asking to talk like nothing had happened. I couldn't go back. The trust was in place, and the future was already laid out in front of me. I didn't respond. The next day, I found myself back at home, sane in the same chair where she'd given me that ultimatum. The house felt emptier than ever. I kept thinking about what would happen next. What if she really did try to fight for the inheritance in court? What if she filed for divorce and tried to get half of everything? I wasn't sure what to expect, but I was ready to face whatever came. Later that afternoon, I called Patricia to check in. She was straightforward as always. "If she tries anything, we're prepared. You're legally protected." I let out a long breath, trying to reassure myself. But I couldn't shake the feeling of dread. Something about the way everything was unfolding just didn't sit right with me. I wasn't sure what was coming, but I knew it was going to be ugly. The next few days were a blur. I got calls from mutual friends asking if everything was okay, if I had heard from her. She had started telling people that I had hidden money from her, that I was being unreasonable, that I was selfish for not sharing the inheritance with her. It stung, but I didn't respond. There was nothing to say. She had made her choice, and now I had made mine. A week after she left, I got the first sign of what was to come. A lawyer's letter. It was from her attorney, demanding that I provide full disclosure of all assets, including the inheritance. The letter was formal, filled with legal jargon, but the message was clear: she was going to fight for her share. I called Patricia immediately. "She's making a move," I said, my voice tight with frustration. Patricia wasn't surprised. "We're ready. She doesn't have a claim to the inheritance. We've done everything by the book." But even as Patricia reassured me, I felt the knot in my stomach tighten. I knew the fight wasn't over. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could stay calm as this dragged on. That night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about the life I had built, the trust I had put in my wife, and how easily everything had started to unravel. I wasn't the same person I had been when we got married, but it wasn't just me who had changed. She had too. I had to remind myself that I wasn't doing this out of spite. I wasn't protecting the inheritance to hurt her, I was protecting my father's legacy. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust, about the foundation of our marriage, and about whether or not we could ever really rebuild what we had lost. The reality was setting in. The battle had just begun. And no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that things would only get worse from here. The inevitable happened a week later. The divorce papers arrived. I'd been expecting them. They didn't make it any easier. The envelope was thick, official looking. When I opened it, I could barely focus on the words at first. My ex-wife, with her lawyer's help, was asking for everything she could get, including half of the inheritance. I stared at the page in disbelief. The petition claimed that the inheritance was a marital asset, that it should be divided just like everything else. There were no mentions of the irrevocable trust, no acknowledgement of the legal steps I had taken to protect what my father had left me. It was clear they didn't understand, or they were hoping I would back down. I didn't waste any time. I called Patricia. "It's here, divorcers. They're asking for half of the inheritance." "Not a problem," she said, her voice calm. "We've been expecting this. You've got everything in place." I tried to steady myself. "But she's going to fight for it. She thinks the money should be part of the divorce settlement." "What do we do now?" "Arrest Dawn with the trust documents," Patricia said. "We've got all the legal ground we need. That inheritance is protected. The trust explicitly excludes spouses. There's no way her lawyer can argue otherwise." It was a relief to hear Patricia's confidence. But even with that reassurance, the reality of the situation weighed heavily on me. My ex-wife now had chosen to fight for something that wasn't even hers. She had walked out over this money, threatened to leave. The next she was trying to take it in court. The next few days were filled with legal back and forth. My lawyer, Patricia, filed our response, attaching the full trust documents to show that the inheritance was separate from any marital property. There was no way to dispute it. But I knew this wasn't going to be over quickly. She wasn't going to give up that easily. Then came the phone call I didn't expect. My wife's lawyer, Tom, called Patricia directly. She put the phone on speaker so I could hear the conversation. Tom's voice sounded tired, almost defeated. We need to discuss this trust situation. My client wasn't fully aware of its implications. Can we meet? I think we can work something out here. Patricia's grin was audible. What's there to discuss, Tom? You just realized your client has no claim to that money. Tom hesitated. Look, we're trying to be reasonable here. My client didn't understand the full extent of the trust. Can we settle this? Patricia's tone was pure steel. There's nothing to settle. The money isn't hers. You can try to argue, but you'll lose. I'll be happy to meet with you, but the facts are clear. That inheritance is locked away in the trust. It's not marital property. Tom muttered something under his breath, but I could hear the stress in his voice. Okay, I'll arrange a meeting, but I'm telling you, Patricia, this is going to get ugly. Patricia chuckled. I'm ready for ugly. A settlement conference was scheduled for a few days later. I knew it was going to be a battle. When I arrived at the office, I was surprised to find my wife there, with her lawyer, and surprisingly her mother. I had a bad feeling immediately. This wasn't just a legal matter anymore. It was personal. We all sat down in the large conference room, the kind with too much wood paneling and windows that made everything feel even more formal. My wife wouldn't even look at me. She stared at the table, her face flushed with anger, but she didn't say a word. Her mother sat beside her, occasionally whispering in her ear. I knew they were both angry at me, angry at the situation, angry at the fact that the inheritance wasn't up for grabs. Tom opened the meeting, making the case that the inheritance should be divided, that it was marital property, and therefore entitled to some portion of the divorce settlement. Patricia didn't even let him finish. I'm not going to waste time on this, Patricia said sharply. The trust is irrevocable, and the language specifically excludes spouses. There's no legal argument here. My wife finally spoke, her voice shaky but forceful. That money is supposed to be ours. We're married. That doesn't matter when the trust was set up. I felt a wave of frustration rise in me. I had been through this already. This wasn't about the money. This was about control, about something she had no right to. I looked at her, keeping my voice calm, though inside I was seething. It's not yours, it's what my father left me. You walked out. You filed for divorce. You have no claim to it. Her face twisted, her eyes darkening. You're being selfish. You're hiding money from me. You think you can just take everything and leave me with nothing? I'm not hiding anything, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I've done everything legally. You're the one who decided to walk away over this. Now, I'm the one who has to live with the consequences. Her mother leaned forward, shooting me a glare. You've always been selfish. Even when you were dating, I warned her about you. You never cared about her the way she deserved. Patricia held up her hand, stopping the verbal sparring. Let's stick to the facts, shall we? She turned to Tom, who was looking more and more uncomfortable. The trust is valid. It's ironclad. You're not going to win this. Assuming your client understands that, the better. The tension in the room was thick. My wife was visibly shaking with rage. She stood up abruptly, knocking her chair back with a sharp screech. Fine. She spat. You want to be this way? Fine, I want the house. And I have 59,000 equity, and I want spousal support. Patricia looked at her unfazed. You're entitled to half of the house equity, $59 art. And that's it. No spousal support. You have a job. You chose to work part-time. This isn't about fairness, it's about responsibility. My wife's face went red, and she started to argue, but Patricia shut her down again. We're done here. You'll get what you're entitled to. The rest is mine. The trust is off the table. His settlement dragged on for another few hours, but the final agreement was reached. She took the dar 59,000 from the house equity, her personal belongings, and half the furniture we'd bought together. She didn't get spousal support, and she didn't get the inheritance. That was non-negotiable. I felt a strange sense of relief, like I had won, but at the same time, couldn't shake the feeling that things between us were irreparable. She was gone, and there was no coming back from this. As we examined the papers, I couldn't help but wonder, was this really the end? Or would this battle continue to haunt me long after the divorce was finalized? The divorce was finalized a few weeks later. I thought that once it was over, I would feel relief. I had hoped that the chapter would close, that I could finally move on. But the moment the papers were signed, I realized something. It wasn't over, it was just beginning. And kept my distance from my ex-wife. But the gossip started quickly. Word spread fast, and I found myself fielding calls from people who had heard her side of the story. According to her, I had hidden money from her. I was selfish. I had manipulated the entire situation and stolen what was rightfully hers. She told anyone who would listen that I was the villain in this story. It was hard to hear the lies, but I didn't engage. There was no point. She had made her bed, and now she was lying in it. As for me, I had nothing to hide. The truth was clear. She had walked out, she had given me an ultimatum, and I had simply protected what was mine. What more was there to say? A few weeks after the divorce was finalized, I received a letter from her lawyer. It was an invoice for $4,500 for home improvements she claimed to have made during the marriage. I could feel the anger rise in my chest as I read it. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about revenge, about her trying to force me to pay for everything she thought she deserved. I knew what I had to do. I forwarded the invoice to Patricia. I was immediately on it. She sent a formal letter to my ex-wife's lawyer, stating that any further claims were resolved in the settlement agreement, and any attempt to reopen the case would be considered harassment. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. My ex didn't stop. She kept texting me from new numbers, each one more desperate than the last. "You destroyed everything. Hope you're happy with yourself," she wrote. "You're going to regret this." I ignored every single message. I didn't owe her an explanation, and I certainly didn't owe her any part of my peace of mind. Then, one afternoon, I got a call at work. It was my boss. My heart sank when I heard the concern in his voice. "Simon," he said, "your ex's mother just called me. She's claiming that you're illegally withholding money from your ex-wife. She said there's an investigation going on. I just wanted to make sure everything is okay." I took a deep breath. "I'm sorry. She has no right to do that. Care of it." "I know," he said. "I told her not to call again. But I wanted to let you know." I thanked him, but the whole thing left me shaken. It was clear that my ex-wife wasn't letting go of her anger. Her mother, too, was using her influence to spread more lies. I called Patricia right away. She wasn't surprised. "This is getting into harassment territory," she said. "We'll send a cease and desist letter to both of them. They'll back off once they realize we're not playing around." I felt a small amount of relief as Patricia took care of it. The next day, the letter was sent. Her mother stopped calling, but that didn't stop the whispers. Had heard from a few of our mutual friends who were still in contact with my ex. They asked if everything was okay, told me that my ex was telling everyone I had ruined her life, that I was the one who had caused all of this. They didn't ask if it was true, they just accepted it, and some of them wanted me to help her out, financially. "You've got the money," they said. "She's struggling. You should help her." I said no. I wasn't going to be manipulated by anyone, and her, and certainly not people who had no idea what was really going on. Each were the same people who hadn't been there for me when I needed support, but were now trying to guilt me into bailing her out. It hurt, but I cut contact with those people. Real friends don't pressure you into doing something you're not comfortable with, especially when they don't understand the full story. As the weeks went on, I started to focus more on my own life, on what came next. Co-refinanced the house at a low rate, paid off the credit card debt, and even started making some updates, little things that made the space feel like mine again. I also opened an account in my father's name for a scholarship fund. My sister and I had always talked about honoring his legacy in some way. And now, with the trust secured, I felt like it was finally time to make it happen. We awarded our first scholarships to 2 local students. It felt good to do something positive, something that truly honored my father's memory. I was moving forward. My ex-wife's life, on the other hand, was falling apart. She spent the next few months blowing through the $59,000 she'd gotten from the house. I heard she'd bought a new SUV, went on a lavish trip to Aruba, and then couldn't make her rent payments. She tried to get a personal loan, listing me as a reference. I refused to sign anything for her. She had to sell the SUV at a loss and move in with her mother. Her part-time bookkeeping job couldn't support her lifestyle, and she had a hard time finding another full-time position. Her life was spiraling, and had nothing to do with it. She had made the choices, and now she was dealing with the consequences. I didn't feel vindicated though. I didn't feel like I'd won. I just felt exhausted by it all. My life was starting to find a rhythm again, but I couldn't erase the mess we'd made of everything. I didn't want to live in the past. I wanted to build something new, something stable. I started seeing someone about 4 months later. She was a high school math teacher, and she had her own life, her own independence. When I told her about the divorce, she didn't ask for details. She just said, "She gave you an ultimatum about your dad's inheritance." What did she expect would happen? That was it. No drama. It was a relief, and it was exactly what I needed. I didn't hear from my ex for a while, but then I got another message from a new number. "Just want you to know I'm doing fine. Better than ever. I've needed your money anyway." I didn't respond. I didn't even think about responding. I had learned something important from all of this. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. When they try to manipulate you, let them. And they value money more than a relationship, let them choose the money. I had called her bluff. She left. She filed. She tried to take what wasn't hers. And now, she was living with the consequences. I had moved on. It felt like I had finally reached the end of the road. It's been about 14 months since the divorce was finalized. I've had time to reflect on everything, the choices, the fallout, the lessons learned. Looking back, it feels like a lifetime ago. But it also feels like just yesterday. It's strange how time works. You think you're stuck in a moment, but before you know it, life pushes forward. Ankle left with whatever you decided to carry with you. My ex-wife's life has continued to spiral. I heard she's now working 2 part-time jobs, her original bookkeeping gig and something at a retail store. I heard she's dating someone now too, though I don't know much about him. Ankle from our old circle still keep me updated. And it's hard to escape the occasional bit of gossip. Her mother still talks about me behind my back, telling anyone who'll listen that I ruined her daughter's life. It's bizarre to think that after everything, she still blames me for the choices my ex made. I've lost a few more friends along the way, those who continued to pressure me to help her out financially. I still believe her version of events, but I've learned that sometimes you have to cut people loose. Real friends understand boundaries, and the ones who didn't were never really friends to begin with. On the other hand, while life has been moving forward in ways I never expected, I've started seeing someone new. Her name is Sarah, and she's a high school math teacher. She's completely independent, with her own place and her own life. She doesn't need me for anything. When I told her the basics of what happened with the divorce, she didn't dig into details. She just said, "She gave you an ultimatum about your dad's inheritance." What did she expect would happen? It was such a relief to hear that. There were no questions, no probing for more, just acknowledgement of what had happened. It felt normal, and that's the thing I've realized over the past year. Normal is what I needed, no manipulation. Just 2 people getting to know each other, without the baggage of someone trying to control the relationship. I've been putting my energy into the things that matter to me. This fellowship fund I started in my father's name has grown. We're now giving out 4 scholarships a year instead of 2. It's small, but it feels right. It feels like my dad's legacy is doing some good in the world, even if he's not here to see it. I've been getting better at work too. Being promoted, taken on more responsibility, and with the extra money, I've started putting it toward paying off the mortgage early. It's the little victories, small steps towards something solid and secure. The house is completely mine now. After the refinance, I made some updates, new furniture, fresh paint in the living room, and I turned the spare room into an office. The space feels different now. It feels like mine, not ours, and it's exactly what I needed. Ankle is married. It was always our house. Now it's just mine, and that ownership feels more than just financial, it's personal. It's about regaining control of my life. One thing I've learned through all of this is that I can't change the past. I can't undo the choices I made, and I can't take back the things that went wrong. But what I can do is choose how I move forward. I can choose what I value and what I won't compromise on. I can choose the people who matter in my life, and cut out the ones who don't. And I can choose to protect what's mine, whether that's my inheritance or my peace of mind. It's funny how things work out. I used to think I had to do everything to avoid conflict, to keep the peace. I thought that's what love was, always giving in, always compromising. But now I see it differently. Love isn't about being a doormat, it's about mutual respect, trust, and boundaries. And sometimes setting boundaries is the hardest thing you'll ever do, but it's also the most important. The last message I got from my ex-wife was a few months ago. She texted me from another new number. It was a simple message, something like, "I just want you to know I'm doing better. Better than ever. I never needed your money anyway." It was a final attempt to make me feel guilty, to make me wonder if I had done the wrong thing. I didn't respond. That's the thing about these manipulative games. They only work if you let them. And I've learned not to let them anymore. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. My ex-wife showed me exactly who she was. Someone who valued money over everything else. Someone who would use a marriage as a way to get what she wanted. And when she realized I wouldn't bend, she walked away. But now, I see things clearly. I don't need her approval. I don't need to explain myself to anyone. I've learned to trust my own judgment, and I've learned that I can make it on my own. The best part of all this is that I'm finally at peace. Not because I won, or because things worked out in my favor, but because I learned to stand up for myself, to protect what's mine, and to walk away from a toxic situation that was never going to change. My life is mine again, and for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough. I'm doing just fine. Better than ever, and that's all that matters.